Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast, Clear as Mud, where we talk to game developers from all walks of life about their personal and professional journeys. I'm your host, Graham Waldrop. As always, our show is presented by Mudstack, the only asset management and collaboration tool custom built for game developers and digital artists. To find out more about Mudstack, head over to mudstack.com. In this episode, you'll meet Katie Jackson, art director for Fusebox. Katie is a UK-based game developer who has had a colorful career from designing playgrounds to creating art for gambling and slot games, and is now the art director on the Love Island mobile game adaptation. In addition to talking about Katie's work, we also talk about a professional trauma she underwent in the form of a catfishing job scandal that serves as a cautionary tale to anyone who's trying to find a job in the industry. If you watch The Tinder Swindler, the Netflix thing, it's very similar to that, but think about it as if it was, something that happened to game designers, and it happened to a ton of people. And she shares all the gory details about what happened and how the man who scammed her and so many others is still at large. Katie is also a writer and is planning on releasing her own novel, Omni in the Valley of the Stars. The work is based in fantasy and has some absolutely stunning concept artwork, which you can see on Katie's site that she plugs at the end of the show. Katie believes in paying it forward in terms of her management style, and she sticks to that mantra for her interview. Without further ado, here's Katie Jackson. All right, so Katie, if you had to pick your favorite kind of art style, be it 2D or 3D or watercolors or whatever, what would be your favorite art style to work with or to look at?
To look at, probably acrylics and gouache. I've done a lot of work with Nathan Falks and Craig Mullins, and their work really speaks to me, especially the old style DreamWorks acrylics. So those sort of things, and then kind of progressing into 3D. I love games like Breath of the Wild and the kind of cell shading with a painterly color set as well. Things like Okami. Yeah,
I was about to say, I was looking at some of your concept art on your site, and I can definitely see that influence in your work, particularly like things like Okami. There's just some absolutely rich work on there. What is like the Omni in the Valley of the Stars and things like that? Like, is that a game you've worked on, or is that because the artwork on there is just very impressive.
Oh, thanks. So that's something that I wanted to do in my spare time. I wanted to create a book. I love writing as well. I wanted to be an author, but I realized I wanted to actually illustrate my own books as well. So I've done a personal project, which is something that I always recommend to students. Really work on something that you have passion about, and that's something that you want to do. I think it kind of shines through with the industry as well, that you've got something there that's your own, and that would be what you would love to work on. So I've written a book. I wrote most of it in on the London Underground, just on my phone, and then finished it off in lockdown as well. And so I've thought about those characters and those environments, and I created a bit of 3D for them as well. And I was playing with a lot of different styles, but that's mainly my core style. The stuff that's on my Omni site is definitely where I want to push forward with and use those to illustrate the book eventually as well.
So that's something you want to keep working on and hopefully publish one day, I take it?
Yeah, definitely. I've just got to edit it. I've done, I think, 70,000 words. It's going to be for young teenagers, young adults. Mm-hmm. So transitioning from, being children to teens. That's a sort of target audience that I was looking at. And I'm really passionate about, Lord of the Rings and, Narnia, all those kind of old school authors and stories. So that's my passion project, and looking to hopefully publish it with a publisher here in the UK eventually. So
I hope you're able to get that out one day, because people need to see this stuff. It's really good. I got caught up looking more at this stuff than I did some of your other work just on your games, just because it was so not that your other work isn't good, but this work is just unreal. It's also so different, and I think from the games you work on, and shows just how much of how much diversity you have in your ability to sort of do whatever art style fits the project you're working on.
Yeah, that's definitely what I've always liked to do, is try and do lots of different styles and not stick to just one. I think that's really difficult, especially for people coming into the industry. It's like, I've got to have a style, I've got to, be able to get into the marketplace. But for me, I guess that's my style. I don't really know. I guess I'm still trying out a lot of different things, but yeah, I can kind of mimic different styles as well, because as an art director, you do need to be looking at lots of different styles for different IPs. So yeah, that's a big passion of mine.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point too, about a lot of people sort of feel like they have to have an identity before they even have one. And then it's sort of like the way you find that, I think, is by exploring those different styles, particularly as an artist and even a writer. Yeah. To a degree, right? I dabble in screenplays and indie film and things like that. I've been doing that for a while, and it's just like, I was very set, most of my writing career so far, I guess, on being like a drama writer. Watched a lot of Sopranos and Scorsese films and things like that. Was really into just making dramas. But now, as I've gotten older, I've experimented with horror, comedy. I think doing that just helps you become a more well-rounded writer, which obviously the same thing with artists.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely would have to lean to different styles. Otherwise, I have heard in the industry, if you only have one style, then that can limit you as well. It can project you, but it can also limit you, because then people think, oh, well, they can only do that one style, and then you'll only be hired to do that one style. Where if you can broaden it and have that style, but be able to do lots of other ones as well, I think that's golden. That's where the meat is really for our sort of
Yeah, and you'll never really run out of work at that point, right? Because you're not pigeonholed into one area.
Yes, exactly. And it can be really difficult to go from a painterly style to manga to cell shading to 3D, 2D. But I think as long as you've got these tools in your back pocket, then it will help you eventually.
Yeah. So when did you know that you wanted to pursue art as a career?
I think from a very young age, because I was always copying Disney characters and backgrounds and trying to make it look exactly like that and trying to understand their style. So I think from a very, very young age, I've either wanted to be an author or an illustrator. Mm-hmm. And it was more towards the author route. But then, you think about where that's going to take you, how difficult is that going to be to get into that industry. And I wasn't ever very good at spelling or grammar. I found that very, very difficult to grasp from a young age. And I guess that's kind of I don't have dyslexia, but they said that I had a lot of learning difficulties, grasping letters and words and reading things a different way. So I then went into just following art, because I thought that was where my passion was, definitely. I'm not sure if it was my strengths at the time, because I was always told by teachers and tutors, are you sure you want to do art? Or, you're not doing it right, or you're not doing what we want you to do. To the point when I was doing my GCSEs at high school, I planned what I was going to do for the main project. So the tutor was great and on board with it, but then I did something totally different. So I drew a mermaid and put gold leaf all over her, and that was not what my coursework was showing I was going to do. I've kind of gone against the stream, I guess, of education anyway, and kept pushing forward.
Did you think that made you better as an artist, to sort of, even though if you had strictures within an assignment, or even maybe even some of your work now where you're just like, no, maybe I need to pursue it in my own way? Yeah,
I think so. I think, it can be really, really difficult, and you can sink or swim. And I've seen a lot of talented artists sink because they've had, freelance experiences, or they've just had knockbacks. But I think because I've had them very, very early on, it just made me more determined, because that was all I wanted to do in the end. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's sort of where the litmus test begins for a lot of artists in any field, is when you start to be rejected, and the work that you put so much time into maybe isn't as good as you thought, or you make a mistake here or there or whatever, right? But it's just how you deal with that rejection and move forward, I think, says a lot about the person and the artist. And you can see, a clear differential between someone who's really adversely affected by that and it like kind of can destroy their work or their self-esteem, and the people that are able to just take that and learn from it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a very difficult industry to get into, and you have to have the right mindset, and you have to put in the hours, and you have to believe in yourself as well, even when people are telling you, to do otherwise. But yeah, you get there eventually. It just might take you a bit longer. Everybody has a different path, and it's been very interesting listening to other podcasts and other artists' journeys. And, you should never really compare it with your own. Mm-hmm. You can't help to, but, everybody has a different way that they've got into the industry, and there's no right or wrong way.
Yeah, there's plenty of people that have success very early on. There's other people that find success much later in their career.
Things can go viral, can't they now? So, we didn't have that. I don't even think we had YouTube when I was training. So there wasn't tutorials. You had to pick up a book. You had a massive 3D Max, massive Bible textbook, and you have to look up how to model and do things. And now everything is so open and accessible to people. So yeah, the industry has definitely changed.
Yeah, I can't imagine using a big sort of Bible or text or whatever to sort of figure out how to use Maya or Max, because when I learned that, it was like I had the internet. It was 2011, 2012. I could look at resources. I could go and find a tutor. There are all these different avenues that I had, to get better as a 3D modeler. Not that helped too much because I was never really too good at it, but I was able to learn it and understand it. But I can't imagine being like, I'm kind of on my own with this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. In 2003, we didn't have anything like we do now, so it was very much sink or swim. And university was definitely very, very difficult, especially for me, because I had no experience of 3D, and I threw myself in there and had to learn everything from scratch. So a lot of the other students had done it before, or they'd just come into the course to get the degree to get into the industry. So they'd had a massive play around with it, or, they knew people in the industry that would teach them things. So you saw these people kind of catapult above you, especially teaching their friends as well. And then you're kind of just trying to make something look real, trying to box model, and things like that. So going from 2D to 3D was really fun. I love 3D, but it was very tricky.
So it sounds like that was just on you really to learn that stuff. But did you have anybody that you went to for help, or did you just sort of beat your head against the wall until you got it?
So I had a really good tutor. Out of, I don't know, we must have had about 5 different tutors. There was one that was particularly good. He was very patient, and I could ask him questions, and he was very supportive, which really helped me, because unfortunately when I was at university I developed a skin reaction to all the stress, and I ended up not being able to hold a pencil. So I was 2 weeks off, and that's when they learnt box modelling. And I came back and I asked my main tutor, I said, can you teach me, can we have some time aside, considering we're paying for the tutors as well. And he just said, ask one of your friends. So yeah, it was that was baptism of fire, definitely. And I just had to sit there and try and figure things out. So yeah, it was really, really tricky.
So what was that process like? How did you get better at it? I mean, obviously repetition and everything, but what specific things were you doing? What specific things were you trying to build in order to sort of, I guess, create almost your own curriculum in a way?
I was following a lot of textbooks, and just pulling the program apart to understand what it does, and putting everything back together and trying to figure things out, and asking questions to the tutor that would spend the time. But yeah, looking back now, it was really difficult because it was 3 years of not having a lot of help. So yeah, it was mainly about self-teaching, and I do say I definitely self-taught myself 3D modeling, for sure.
When did you start to feel confident that you were heading in the right direction?
I was pretty confident in my end of year film, the last one that I produced, because I was able to rig, animate, put music to it, edit, it created a character, created a little scene, and I went back to my roots. I'd put 2D in there as well. It was like a storybook that opened with little pop-ups, 2D and 3D.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and I put it to a music box that was given to me by my granddad. And I also got my sister to read out the poem, and that was in the background, and that was a poem that my dad read to us about being lost in the woods, a girl that's got lost in the woods. I guess she's trying to find her path. And yeah, I really loved working on it, and I even put some little particle effects of a shooting star in there, all cute little things that I learnt. So yeah, I think I really enjoyed doing that project, and I was confident with it. I think if even the 3D might not have been fantastic, there was a whole fully rigged character in there, and I'd taught myself it all, so I was quite proud of it.
Yeah, I love that. That sounds very personal. Also, having all the elements of family, from the story to your sister reading everything.
Yeah.
It just sounds like that was sort of a culmination of where you were in your life in a way.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's been very important to me, definitely. And my family have been so supportive, because I had no idea what I wanted to do when I was leaving college, because I went to the person that you speak to there, and to explain, what your passions are and what course you want to go on next, the advisor. And he was quite a very, very old man. And I said to him I wanted to do special effects. And he said to me, and he was looking it up in a textbook, because this is olden days, 2000s. Mm-hmm. And he said, you're going to need a chemistry degree. I was like, what? I hate chemistry. I can't do physics. These are like complete opposites to what I wanted to do. And I went away from there, and I realised, quite a lot later on, he must have thought I meant physical special effects. I wanted to go in and blow things up. And it could have been so far from what I wanted to do. So I was completely stuck. I had no idea. I'd gone and applied for illustration courses around the UK and was rejected by a couple of them. And then a friend of my mum's came up with this course that was 3D animation. And it had everything. It had 2D illustration and animation in there as well, and I thought, well, that sounds interesting, and that's how I fell into that. And then 3D is where my whole career took off, which wasn't expected.
I just love that. Yeah, I don't think I know any VFX people that have that know anything about chemistry. So that's hilarious.
Yeah, it did put me off.
Yeah. So once you got out of school, what does that look like? What happens then?
Was unemployed for a year and working as a waitress in my spare time, doing lots of freelance gigs, loads and loads of children's book illustrations, and in those days you had to bid for things on Elance and iFreelance and all those kind of websites, trying to beat everybody else's budgets and grab yourself an author so that you could, get a few illustrations out there. And I had a few published. They're on Amazon. They're kind of old school now, but that was really fun, and that was really great working with my clients, and that I grew that quite well. And at one point, I thought I would do it full time, but then you can't get a mortgage on freelance work. It's so up and down.
Right.
So I realised, I've got to get something full time, and I landed a job at Xerox I ended up being a senior there within 3 months, because I think people moved around, and then they made me senior technical illustrator, and I was illustrating manuals for the copywriting machines and using CAD and going in, taking pictures and renaming pages and such. So that was 3 months, but that was good to have on the CV, and that's what the recruiters told me. They said, just stick it out for 3 months. It's going to look great on your CV. And I was bored to the point of tears. I mean, it was so boring.
That's not really creative at that point. You're just doing stuff for manuals.
Yeah, no, it wasn't what I wanted to do. It was a lovely team of very old guys, and but yeah, it was good to have the experience of working in a creative industry as such.
So before you went to Xerox, and you were being a waitress, and you were doing the freelance stuff, did you have time to continue to work on your 3D skills, or was it just like you were really wrapped up in freelance and doing your day job?
Yeah, I think I was more moving towards 2D. My 3D skills, I just kept up with what was going on with 3D Max at that point. But yeah, I didn't do much 3D work after graduating.
Did you worry that your skills were going to sort of diminish at that point, and did you have any concerns there?
Not really, because the industry did not move that fast. Back in those days, there weren't new tools coming out. 3D Max was pretty much 3D Max. So, we were using, obviously, like ray tracing. That was the new thing. So yeah, it wasn't too technical, not like it is now, where every day there's a new tool or a new program coming out.
Right, that's what I have to wonder about. If someone was in a similar situation today, what is that like for them at that point, I would wonder.
Oh yeah, it'd be completely different. You'd definitely be, spending your evenings doing 3D and keeping on top of things and discovering all the new tool set and all the new programs that they've got out there, and Substance, ZBrush, all the new ones that keep coming out, and the ones that people expect you to know to get into the industry these days.
Yeah, like I remember when I was in school, like Mudbox was a big, or was it Mudbox, or it was something Autodesk made, and it was very similar to kind of Max and Maya, at least from what I remembered. But then when you tried to get into the industry, like no one cared that you knew that.
Yeah.
Right. It was just like figuring out which things you have to know. I mean, it should be evident at this point, right? But even when I was in school, I was like, well, do I need to know Mudbox? Like, I think ZBrush is way more important than that. But it's hard to know what people are exactly what you need to be doing and exactly what they're looking for.
Yeah.
In terms of employers.
Yeah, it's the same with degrees as well. Did I need a degree to get my first job? Probably not. Have I needed a degree to get any of my jobs? Has anybody asked to see my degree or what mark I got for my degree? Nobody has ever asked. So unless I want to move countries, of course a degree is very, very useful. But next time around, would I say to people they should definitely go to university? I would not. I would say, go and start learning yourself. Go and train, or do a short course like at Escape Studios in London, which is a 3-month course. You'd learn a hell of a lot more there than you would in 3 years in the industry. So
yeah, I think that's really interesting now. Is like there's always this pressure growing up of you got to go to school, you got to go to college, you got to do this, you got to do that, and it's like particularly for the arts.
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessary at all. I mean, I think there are certainly benefits. You can learn a lot. You can take advantage of the resources that you're given. You can network and meet people that you might work with outside of school. But in terms of learning the core skills, you don't need school at all, I don't think, for that.
Yeah, it's quite funny you say that actually about networking, because my ex-tutor, the one that said, go and ask your friends, he lives down the road. I've seen him in the chip shop, but he also owns a company as well down the road, and they're recruiting for art directors and such. And I think it's a VR company that he runs now. So it's quite interesting who you would like to work with, and I think you have to be very careful with people in the industry. Everybody does know everybody. It's a very small industry. You know somebody that knows somebody always. So,
right.
Yeah, that's definitely a top tip to keep it professional.
Yeah, definitely. So after Xerox, what happens?
I quit Xerox because I'd met a guy at the place I waitressed. He was one of my regulars. He used to come in with his wife, and he had a media company, and he said, would you like to come and work with me part-time, doing account management, bits and pieces, invoicing and such. and I'm going to get an office. And I was like, well, that sounds great. It's better than Xerox. So I was like, right, I'm out of here with Xerox. They were like, are you sure you want to go? I was like, yep, I'm going. So I went and worked with this guy for 8 months in his office in Portobello Road, which is a lovely area. And that was great. It gave me a lot of confidence. I had to do a lot of cold calling. I had to do a lot of editing with Avid. And I met a lot of stars along the way as well, like Sir Ian McKellen and
cool.
Kevin Spacey, and it was great because you were doing a lot of interesting things and working day and night with the camera teams. Met a lovely camera guy who did a lot of underwater stuff for the BBC. So yeah, it was really interesting, a lot more interesting than Xerox. I'm really glad I did that. So yeah, that was 8 months, and that was part-time as well as the waitressing.
That's cool. Yeah, especially because then you're acquiring more skills, not necessarily skills that are going to, that directly relate to what you want to do, but in terms of interpersonal skills, I can think of no better training than cold calling.
Yes, yeah, because they're like, why are you calling? So, what are you selling us? So yeah, really not fun to do it, but I'm glad that he pushed me to do it because it did help, definitely.
Okay, so you're at this media company. What was the project with Ian McKellen? I'm a huge fan of his, so I just have to ask.
Oh yeah, he was lovely to meet as well, and he signed. I've got his signature framed downstairs, and it's on the back of one of the permission slips that I was getting people to fill out. So that was quite cool. He says, "Best wishes, Katie." I was like, yes.
That's great.
Yeah, it was. I think it was a young person's awards ceremony, and they had him there, Davina McCall from the UK, and they had Kevin Spacey, who I only saw because I bumped into him coming out of a door. Was a bit shocked. He's very, very short. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, Ian McKellen was there giving out awards, which was great. And I had no idea I was going to meet him, so that was lovely.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So when you're actually getting into the industry, did you get into industry after working for 8 months at this company, or is there a little bit more sort of transition stuff? You're dealing with recruiters too, right? They're probably telling you all the things you need to be doing to build portfolio and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm constantly training and trying to get my portfolio there, and still trying to freelance and doing some, illustrations on the side as well. At that point, I then went and joined the Sherlock Holmes Museum as their graphic designer. I'd never done graphics design before. I'd done illustration though, and that's what they were looking for. They were looking for somebody that could do a lot of illustration. So I stayed there for 9 months after that, and was working there full time, and that was probably my first full-time creative role, I would say.
So what's your mindset like at that point? Are you sort of settling in the museum stuff, or is it still like this is just a stepping stone? I'm learning more stuff, but this is not where I want to be.
Just a stepping stone, because the place and the people were very crazy. So it wasn't your normal workplace at all. We had Dr. Watson, walking around. We had Sherlock Holmes with his magnifying glass. These are really, really old guys. And yeah, it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do, and it wasn't clearly defined what I was meant to be doing there as well. It was like a bit of website design was happening at the same time, and souvenirs I was designing, and brochures. So yeah, at that point, I actually handed in my notice. I was like, this isn't what I want to do. I'm sure I can find something else. And then it was 2009 and recession hit, and I was out of work for a year.
Oh man.
Yeah, not a good time to leave. But then after that, I was applying for a lot of roles, and that's when I went into Monster Play, which is a playground company doing visualization and creating playgrounds for children in schools and parks. And I was there for 4 years using 3D Max.
So I was about to say that must be just strictly 3D work, unless you're concepting stuff out.
Yeah, that was strictly 3D. They did allow me to do some 2D and see if that would look nice on some of the plans, and and we used a bit of 2D there as well. But then that's where my training really ramped up, because I realised I didn't want to just do 3D anymore. I wanted to get into games, and I actually wanted to do concept art. So that's when my training really got serious.
And what are you learning so far about all the different places you're working at in terms of how to interface with folks and work together as a team? What were those lessons like back then?
So yeah, I guess at Monster Play, that was the first team that I worked with, that were actually, other creatives there. Mm-hmm. And they were very nurturing, and I asked so many questions. I had no idea, of half of the things that I needed to know to do my job there. And they were very, very patient. And it was a very small company. It was a family-run company. So we're all in one room together. And I think that's probably where I learnt more 3D than I did definitely at university. And I got really quick and really good at it. And the lead would always ask me to work with him. So that was really great. And there was good progression there as well. So yeah, it was. I think that's where I learnt how to be in a workplace and how to conduct myself and how to work as part of a team.
Yeah, that sounds like that must have been like the real formative place, like you were saying. Like this is when you kind of mastered 3D, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Cool. So now you're ready to get into games. You've been at this place for 4 years. What happens next?
Yeah, so I did want to get into games. I wanted to do mostly 2D because I started training with Bobby Chiu and with Schoolism. Back then, they weren't very well known. Now they are huge. But yeah, I was in the first few years of them opening up their doors, and it was an online course, and I'd never had anything like that before. Like I said before, we didn't have courses, we didn't have YouTube, we didn't have anything except books. So yeah, I trained really, really hard with Nathan Fowkes, who really pushed me, and he would just be very, very critical of the work and not as you as a person, which was something I wasn't used to. And that really made me want it even more, that they could obviously see that they were spending their time helping me, and that it was worth it. So I was working at Monster Play, and I was doing a full day there, and then I was coming home and I was working until midnight most nights, doing coursework and trying to understand and looking at, other people's coursework, and getting a lot of help from Bobby Chiu and Nathan to progress. So I think once I grasped what I hadn't learned at school, which was a lot of the basics of colour and light and shape and form, and things that we seem to miss on the curriculum here, all the basics that you need. Once I understood that I needed to go back and I needed to redo things and rethink, I think that's when my career started to take off, because I was looking to interview with King, and I went and interviewed with them, and this is before Candy Crush. This was when they were looking at doing Bubble Witch. So I interviewed with them, and then a few other companies. Like there was a company that did very old school medieval games, and they were asking me to do UI. I didn't know what UI was. I did a test, but yeah, they weren't sure. So I wasn't sure either. We both weren't sure where this was going to go. So then I applied with a company called Digimint and was accepted as a junior games artist, and started to get the ball moving with them, and quit the 3D visualization industry and was going to go in and do concept art, 2D.
Yeah, that's a lot too, right? When you're getting this sort of higher level education while you're doing a job. I mean, how many hours are you working a week at that point?
Oh, so I'd be doing, I think it was quite early, 8 until 5. And then I'd come home, and then from 6 till midnight, I would be training. And I knew that if I just put in the hours there, just put them in, that eventually things would start clicking into place and I'd understand what I needed to do. And I'm really glad I did. And I know that they say, you know, you're doing the hard work now, and then eventually you won't have to do this every single day. So yeah, that went on for quite some time, because I think each of the courses was 6 weeks, and I have done quite a few of their courses now.
Did you ever run out of steam or have any doubts about what you were doing, or was it like, I'm doing this no matter what, like bring it on?
I thought, well, what else have I got to lose? I've got a job, I'm doing 3D. If I can get my 2D up to the level I want as well, and I can really go in and actually draw and paint, and that's what I really wanted to do, then I can always fall back on my 3D, and that's what I've always been able to do, which has been, you know, I think that's really helped me get into the industry, and in all of my jobs 3D until now, until my recent job, I've always used 3D, and I've been the 3D artist usually at the companies that I've joined.
And you're not really you've never been a teacher, right?
No, but I nearly went into it. I nearly went into teaching, very, very close. I actually had applied and I'd gone for the interviews to start my training as a teacher. And then that week I got the Monster Play acceptance from the interview, and I then went that way. Otherwise, I definitely would have looked at going into being an art teacher.
Wow, so things could have gone very differently.
Yeah, sometimes I still get emails from them about the teaching courses, and yeah, I still play it back now. I go into colleges and universities, and I go and I talk to budding students in there, and also high schools. I've done a few talks, so yeah, it's something that I would have enjoyed doing, because I would have liked to have helped other people get into the industry, but now I feel I'm doing that from a different perspective now.
Right, because I was going to say, like, how influential was the teaching style of someone like Bobby Chiu on you in terms of how you treat, you know, your team now as an art director?
Yeah, I guess they're very open, and I think Bobby Chiu particularly is very, very lovely with his constructive criticism. Nathan Fowkes was more, you know, you're not getting this right, you need to get this right. And I'd be like, but I don't understand. So yeah, their styles were both very, very different. And I took Bobby Chiu's course first, and he was very much hand holding, and he's like, yeah, I can see, you know, these bits are good, but these bits you need to improve on. So I think that style, I've been able to play forward definitely when I'm managing other artists. But other artists that are more senior or lead, then it's more the direct approach, like Nathan. But you know, not so stern, just a helping hand.
And that makes a lot of sense, considering, you know, like, right, if you're dealing with like a junior artist, you're going to talk to them differently than a senior or a lead. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's how I've always managed, and that's always been, you know, my advice to new managers or lead artists that are, you know, going to manage a team. You have to manage every single person differently. They all think differently. They all react differently. They've all got different mental health problems. You know, you just don't know until you know those people inside out, how they tick, and how you're going to get the best out of them. And people do... people react differently, and that's something I've learned from becoming a lead and then on to director. So, yep.
But there was a time when the industry wasn't so kind to you, when you were involved in this absolutely insane catfishing story where you were promised a job, you were never paid, and I think there's definitely a ton of lessons to be learned for our audience in terms of when they're taking a job out of school, what to watch out for. Or rather, not just in school, but at any point in time.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, when I was leaving Monster Play after 4 years in the industry, I had a really good career there. We had bought a place, so we had a mortgage to pay. And yeah, I took the chance. I was with the recruiter. They're a normal recruiter. There's nothing to worry about. They're the ones that got me, the interview with King, and then that didn't happen. So then they got me an interview with Digimon, and they're like, oh, they're looking for a junior artist as well. So went for it, got it, did the interview, did it at some London offices. It all looked shiny, looked amazing. Met the art director there as well. They looked at my work. I kind of did a bit of their artwork and did my own take on it. They were like, loved it. So I was like, great. Took a little while for the offer to come through. But then when it came through, I was then waiting for the contract to come through. That took some time. That should have probably put alarm bells ringing. But because I'd never been in the industry, I wasn't really sure what to expect. And it was about a month later, they finally got the contract. There was kind of excuses like, oh, the lawyer's place flooded, all of the laptops don't work, the lawyer's trying to get you this contract. I was like, right, God, the place flooded. Okay, it's in Oslo, so maybe it's flooded.
Yeah.
Wow, okay, well, we'll just wait a bit longer. But then, yeah, so that happened. Contract came through. I was like, great, I can finally leave. Skipping around, leaving my job that I did love, but yeah, there was only so many playgrounds I wanted to design. So yeah, I went off into the sunset and thought that would be great. But unfortunately, it got to the point where I was meant to be into the office, and I went the night before to the train station, bought my monthly ticket, was ready to go the next day. And then the manager, the CEO, said that the offices aren't ready yet. Could you work from home for a bit longer? I was like, oh, okay, I'll work from home, but you're going to have to send like a computer or something. Eventually I can use my own one for now. And so they were fine with that. They linked me into the main art director that was based in Oslo. He took me under his wing, was showing me how to do some colour and light for one of the games. And then, yeah, I was doing bits and pieces. And then I started to chat to the other two employees. And eventually it became apparent that they hadn't been paid. And I was saying to the director, well, I'm going on holiday soon, so I really need to be paid. I put these holiday dates in before I started. And then he seemed to get very, very angry with us. He got on a phone call and was shouting at all of us for talking to each other and was going a bit crazy. And, of course you're going to get paid and, all of that. I was like, okay. And he's like, my wife has told me that I should sack all of you. And I was just like, okay. Yeah, calling you names and all sorts. I was like, wow, I don't really understand what is going on now.
And how long had it been?
A month.
At this point?
This had been a month.
A month.
Yeah, I'd been there
No
a
pay.
month. No pay. Got a pay slip when I was on holiday, but no pay. And I just knew it. I just knew that something dodgy had gone on. And then a family member of mine had searched the internet, and I think 20 pages into the internet found a depression forum. And there was a person on there from New Zealand who mentioned this person's name, who runs the company, who still runs the company, and said that they had lost 30 grand of their own money because this person came over to New Zealand. He was the person that lost the money was a coder, and I think he'd put some code out there, and this guy had seen it and was like, right, let's start a company together. And apparently the other times he came over to New Zealand, he was just found in the casinos, even though the coder had put all this money in, had a team, they were making the game, but there was no company, there was no funding, no investors like it had been promised. So he eventually left, and he suffered from depression and left the industry, became a yoga teacher. So I found this. I dug deep, found his email address and contacted him, and he could not believe that this guy was still doing it. Because we're talking about 1990s when this happened to him. And this is now, early 2000s, and this was still happening. So, and he was still operating out of London. So I took him to court. I won. he didn't show up. And they said at that point, I've got the court documents, which are now out of date. I've never been paid. He's never paid me, even though he was demanded by the court to pay. I also got enlisted sheriffs to go after him. And every time they would get to his office, it would move. So it wasn't a real office. It was just an address. And this happened 3 times. So now I'm running out of money, trying to get money from him with a mortgage to pay. And court costs, I had to pay to go to court to get money. And I never got those court costs back. And the 2 guys that I worked with, they had to pull out because they couldn't afford court. Because, they were, one of them was over here, one of them was based in Sweden. But nobody ever got paid. Or if they did, it was only a very small amount. And then it wasn't the right amount. And it was just kind of tidbits. I stopped working straight after I didn't get paid. And then there was a lot of abuse coming my way. You shouldn't be stopping the work and blah, blah, blah. I was like, well, I'm stopping. I'm done.
What did the recruiter say about all this before it escalates to, you go into court and all this stuff?
Yeah, so the recruiter, they said they haven't been paid either, and they were taking him to court. So the recruiter felt incredibly bad for me and the art director. And he tried to find us another job, and he did. And he placed us with a real company, with real money. And that was our saving grace, because it was about 2-3 months of no wage. It was becoming the winter. It was going into October. I think I started in June or July. Going into your savings to pay for the roof over your head was not ideal. I was getting a little bit tricky, because I've always been, the one that would be able to earn more. So it was a lot on my shoulders, and we were totally taken in. And the fact that, a guy that used to work at, CD Projekt, who was my art director, he was taken in as well. It was done very cunningly, and like I said, the guy still operates, the company's still there, and to this day we've never been paid, and he's never acknowledged it. But he is a bit of a psychopath. I did say to him that the guy from New Zealand says hello, and that's the only email he ever replied to after all this started. And he said, "Oh yeah, I say hello back." I was like, "Oh, you're a very dangerous person." To see him, there's photographs on his Instagram and all sorts of him going off to the private island, playing tennis with Richard Branson, and he's now trying to cure blindness. I did reach out to Richard Branson, but obviously they probably have no idea, because he's that good. He's that good at what he does, and he's still doing what he wants. So that was a real horrible way to get into the industry. I have made it very people aware of him and the company on my platform, on my LinkedIn. I've pushed it out quite a few times, and people have been very positive and shared it as well. So hopefully people will find the information they need online to steer clear. And I would just say, please do your homework. If we could find it 20 pages into the internet, and if if it's a new company, if something doesn't smell right, then definitely check it out. But it was, very, very cloak and dagger, and it was done very well, unfortunately.
Well, it's just insane to me that you won in court, he's ordered to pay, and you still haven't got any money.
No.
It just doesn't make sense why they can't track this guy down and force him to, pay what you're owed and what I'm sure a lot of other people are owed.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would like to go into London one time and try and find him. But yeah, because the thing was that I was only awarded the 1 month, because that's when I started the court proceedings. But actually, I stayed employed by them for the full 3 months. I didn't work for the next 2 months. I left it hoping that I would get paid, or that, things would work themselves out. And they didn't. And then after those 2 months, I resigned. So actually, I should have actually been owed 3 months' pay. But yeah, it never materialized, and I don't think it ever will, unfortunately.
Yeah, are you at the point now where you're sort of just like I gotta just stop pursuing this, or you still just feel like you need to get what's yours? And with, I assume, a bunch of interest at this point.
So it was such a long time ago. I think it was 2016. So actually, the court dates now, it wouldn't be applicable. I wouldn't be able to enforce it. I'd have to go back through the whole system and do it again.
Oh wow.
Yeah, because it's only for a few years. I think 4 or 5 years. So we're definitely out of time now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely wouldn't pursue it anymore for my own mental health. I reckon it's best to leave it be and just warn people of it. And if anybody came to me and asked me, it's still on my CV, I've still got it there. Then yeah, I'd definitely be able to give them advice on that one.
How are you doing mentally at this point, having gone through that? Not like now, but like in the moment, right? Like, are you sort of like, forget the industry, or is it kind of like, okay, I mean, obviously you landed in a much better spot and the recruiter helped you out, but how long did it take to sort of recover and be able to focus on your work again?
Oh, straight away. I think I've always had a very strong work ethic, and I'm very strong with my mental health. I've never had any mental health problems, probably until that point. And I didn't know what was going on in that October. It was kind of all a little bit of a blur. But I just kept thinking every day, this is going to be sorted. We're going to get this sorted out. I think I just had the hope there. Then that's what propelled me forward. And then I was like, right, this is kind of like all the other setbacks I've had in school and such. Let's just go for it. I need to get into this other company, because the art director was placed there first, and he was like, I'm going to bring you with me. I need you as my junior artist. I was like, great. And we definitely had bonded through the whole experience. Then as soon as I got placed there, which I knew I would, I went for an interview. And as soon as I was placed, I was fully into it. And it was a great company to be there. And I was there for a short time before I wanted to move on and get more into the industry. But yeah, I was doing 3D work. I was doing some character designs. And it was for a lottery company. So it was very, very different. It's not the sort of games I thought I'd get in. If you see my Omni work, I really thought I'd be, into some kind of fantasy RPGs. We didn't really have mobile gaming then. Like I said, this was before Candy Crush. So that hadn't opened up then. This was basically, you're going to get into console or film. Those were the industries you could go into. So this was this lottery company. It was HTML5. It was all on the internet, like Google Earth satellite image. It was that, and you'd go and dig up spaces and find treasures and things. So yeah, we were very creative there, and we had a good time. Was
that the same company where you worked on a lot of the different slot games you've created?
So no,
and gambling games?
No, I then went to Gaming Realms because they stopped doing character work at Geolotto. So I went into gambling games, and they were like, yeah, we need someone to do characters. We don't have anybody that does 3D. So I was like, okay, great. I do 3D. And that's what I fell back on again. I did 3D. They wanted me to learn Blender, so I learned it within the week that I was there. I was there 1 week learning Blender and Unity, got my assets into Unity, animated in Unity, never used Unity or Blender. Then from there I was their 3D artist, because they had a great concept artist there. She was terrific, and she did a lot of character art. But because she did the characters, they said, you can't do characters. And I was like, what? I can't do characters? They're like, no, she does the characters. I was like, fine, I'll do backgrounds. And so I wanted to get really good at backgrounds. And that's why I mainly do a lot of environment art now, which I love, which is where it all opened up with Nathan Fouts. So I'm still training at this point, still training with schoolism.
And what did you think of Unity when you first got into it? I mean, it sounds like you conquered it pretty fast, but what did you think of it then? What do you think of it now?
Yeah, it's very different now. Now it's really scary. Back then there wasn't much to it. You know, you put your assets in there, you animate. I was animating 3D and 2D. By the end of it, we moved everything over to HTML5. So I was using Spine, and then I was doing some animations with Spine and some animations in Unity. I was doing some like pre-rendered stuff from Blender, throwing that into Unity. That was quite fun. We were doing some 3D stuff as well with like kind of Indiana Jones style with mummies and, you know, chains and whips, and, you know, you've got to kill these mummies in a certain time and things like that. And then we would do kind of Candy Crush stuff. So there was a lot of different styles going on because it was slot games. And you could basically do whatever you wanted. You know, you come up with a theme, they come up with the math model, and then you could just go in there and pick whatever kind of art styles you liked. And that's what I liked about gambling games industry. I mean, the pay is very, very good in gambling games as well, but also the range of styles, and, you know, you can play to your strengths, which was really fun, and it wasn't limiting at all. So yeah, that was really great.
Cool. Yeah, and I bet also just having an idea of what the game is going to be. It's rather, you know, with those kinds of games, it's in terms of the scope of it, right? I mean, it's very like everything's right in front of you as a player. So it's sort of like, you know, like having those kind of parameters, I imagine, would be good in terms of just knowing exactly what you need to do. There really isn't like a way you can really branch out of the stricture of what a slot game is, I would imagine.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you get kind of like when I moved to Camelot, when I went to the National Lottery, you get lots of like mini games that you can do, you know, some kind of predetermined games as well. But, you know, the themes are what really drove me, because I just wanted to get better, and it didn't matter if it was 2D or 3D. I could do both, and I just wanted to keep pushing the creativity and pushing the level for myself. Because I remember there was a recruiter, and I was trying to get into even gambling games right at the beginning, and I remember her just saying, you know, on LinkedIn, you've got such a great presence, but this is the level we need. And it was a gambling games artist, and her work was so good, and it was so creative, and I thought, oh, okay, so there is scope for that in that industry. And, you know, a lot of people do look down on it, it's gambling games, but purely for the art, I was very happy just to do the artwork. Obviously, I think towards the end, morals took over, and I really wanted to get out of there. And I think that happens to a lot of artists. But for a training ground and for salary, it was great. It was a very steady job, and those companies are still going today. You know, they haven't folded; they're still there.
That's the other thing too. You can produce those games. I imagine like development time on each game isn't too long compared to, you know, bigger games.
Yeah, it's a very quick turnaround, unless we were doing like hero games, which had a lot of time put into them. I think we did one called like Dragon Island, and we used Spine for the first time, and each dragon had like 80 bones in them, and these are tiny, tiny little dragons. And, you know, we were trying to figure out how to animate without meshes, and just using Spine for the first time as well. So yeah, it was really good because, like I said, it's a training ground. You can use whatever you need to get the job done, if it's Spine or Unity or 3D or just 2D. So yeah, it was. I think that's probably where I learned the most about the creative side of the industry.
Oh, cool. So now you're doing the Love Island game, and this is your first time being an art director, right?
Yes, yeah. At Camelot, I went to progress to lead artist, and then propelled into art director, which has been brilliant. It's been a really, really interesting experience. I learned a lot at Camelot of managing people and different types of people, to then, you know, develop my management skills. And being art director, I've done everything from like org charts, roadmaps, budgeting, to doing hands-on work myself, and then to where I'm really passionate about, moving into mentoring younger artists, getting them trained up and skill sharing, and then propelling them into the industry. That's been really, really rewarding. And that's, I think you can tell by my whole journey why that's been so important to me, to be able to help those artists. It's not about me producing a style that everybody's got to follow or being master of the universe. It's more about those artists getting to where they should get to and giving them the helping hand that I guess I've had, but I've paid for it. Like, I had to pay for it. I didn't have anybody just like, on my side throughout the I don't even know how many years it's been. 15 years that I've been in the industry now. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you seem like a very pay-it-forward person. So to be in a position of power, as an art director, and then be able to say, I'm priding myself mostly on helping the young artists find their way in the industry. I mean, I think that is just a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's definitely what I'm all about. There's not much else to it for me. And I think at Fusebox, I was able to do that. I had at the start a great team of artists. They were all very, very different. They've all got jobs in the industry now, in mobile games. So yeah, I was really glad that I could help them in different ways. Each of them were very, very different, and managed them very differently, and understood where they wanted to go and what they had to do to get there. So that's been really great. And I think for the future, we will be looking at younger artists again, coming fresh from the industry, and that's what I'm really looking forward to with exploring with Fusebox, with being a helping hand again for future artists.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Well, actually, I wanted to switch gears a little bit to the work on Love Island. How did you guys decide what the art direction, like the look for it, the aesthetic? Because when I look at it, it kind of reminds me a little bit of the Grand Theft Auto loading screens, if you're familiar with that kind of style.
Yeah, so Love Island's a really interesting one. Each season, the art style changes, and I joined halfway through season 3, so the art style had already been picked. They didn't have an art director, they had a lead artist then. And it was very, very different to season 2. Season 2 was more Grand Theft Auto and a bit more realistic, whereas season 3 was more cartoony and, bigger features, bigger eyes. But the anatomy was much better on season 3. So there was it was a different switch, but the one thing that I brought to it was the backgrounds, which was what I've always been passionate about ever since, kind of being forced down that avenue into environment art. And they were using blurred photos. So I was like, no, we've got to get background art in here. It's got to tell the story. We need emotion and colour and light. Yes, you've got the characters, but you've got to have some kind of backgrounds in here. So that's what we really worked on. And I had a great artist who, that was definitely his passion. So we were able to get those going. And those have stayed in. And now I think we're on season 5. So season 4, I set the style. So we listened to our players. We knew that they wanted to have a bit more realism from season 2. So slowly moving away from season 3, which did okay. It was fine. But I think our fan base, who are very, very passionate, wanted something more realistic. These are IF games. They want to be able to imagine themselves with these characters. And if they're too cartoony, it's just too far removed. So we heard that. We didn't want to go completely back to season 2, but we were working on it. So season 4 was a bit more realistic. And then I went on maternity leave halfway through season 4. So even season 5, that art style was already set from season 4. So yeah, I guess I'm working on a new IP with Fusebox at the moment, which is really, really exciting because I finally get to set the art style, and I'm exploring so many different styles, from really simple ones to more painterly, we're looking for something really edgy and different, and I think it's really exciting now. I think Love Island is its own kind of brand, its own core, it's our core game. So there's only so much I can do with that. But the new one, we're really going all for it now. And it's been really, really exciting to work on something and actually do some of the artwork myself as well these past couple of weeks. So yeah, this is now I feel I'm going into more of the art director role, not just the management side. So yeah, it's really progressing at Fusebox.
Yeah, that sounds great, especially with like sort of having a blank canvas, right? Because I imagine working on, and some of the games you worked on before, the slot games, they're based on IP. Some of them were, I think. So it's like you always have to come back to that in terms of what the style fits for something that's already been previously established.
Oh yeah. I was in charge of Monopoly at Camelot, and that's a huge IP, and you had to make sure everything went through quite a few different product owners on our side, and then also with Hasbro. So that had to be perfect. And new assets, they had to look like they belonged with the Monopoly universe. So that was very restricting. And then Love Island, not so restricting. I can do parts of it, but it is owned by ITV, so it is their IP again. So with this new one, this is 100% ours, and I just get to have a bit of fun. So that's actually been really rewarding at the moment. Setting up a new team and also working on a new IP.
Yeah, that's great. Can you tell me a little bit more about how your pipeline is being set up in terms of art direction for this new game?
Yeah, I mean, our pipeline has definitely changed since we have outsourced more work recently rather than keeping it in-house. So we've got different branches of outsourcers. We've got one that does like the engine and some of the testing, and then we've got another one that does the artwork. So at the moment, it's all new. I'm kind of setting all of that up. We're just prototyping different art styles at the moment with the narrative team, and seeing what works with their characters, because they're the ones developing the characters and writing the stories, and they're a massive part of the company, and I work incredibly closely with them and their team. So that's what's really different with IF games as to just like slots and such. I've never had a narrative team that I've worked with before until Fusebox, but it's really good, and we get everybody's buy-in. So the pipeline is going to be doing some of the work in-house. We're going to be looking at getting the style down, and then we're going to look at outsourcing a lot of the work. Whereas if we're going to move to more in-house teams, then we'll be looking at internal processes, which we have done on the other games, where we were starting to get the team ready to use Unity and get the assets into Unity themselves to check them. And that's how the pipeline would end with art anyway. But we start very, very early on just from narrative and from scripts, and just get asset lists and go from there.
And that must be cool also being able to have, like you were saying, to have a narrative department. How receptive are they to you in terms of you giving them feedback? And I guess vice versa too, if they're giving feedback to you on the direction of the art.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely know what they like and what they don't like, that's for sure. But we're all fully remote now, so we're very diplomatic, and we make sure that we're giving constructive criticism, and I think that we all work really well together. So yeah, we only just met up recently in the flesh for the first time in a couple years. But yeah, I think everybody at Fusebox, doesn't matter which team it is, the old team, the new team, the one thing that everybody is on board with is creating, just a really good game, a game that, we're proud of. And I think that that's always shone through with the narrative team and the art team. We've always just wanted to do our best for our fans and our players. And we listen to them, we read everything, and we digest it, and we do a lot of data testing. I make sure that an art style has been tested before we then go and push it out there. I do a lot with data and insight. They're very, very important to my development with the new IP as well. So
they would review what you guys have been working on. Do they submit anything to any fans or anything like that, or how do they get that information back to you?
Yeah, we do A/B testing, so we will test different styles. We'll put out Facebook ads. There'll be like banners and such, and find out the click-through rates, and then we'll actually look at the data. If they were male, female, where they're from, all that kind of stuff to make sure that we're hitting the target audience, and we figure out which way to go in. We've even done stuff with Love Island. We've put out surveys, in-game surveys, like, which famous person, would you rather be with? And we've put like a list of them, and that's been very interesting because it kind of shows how young a lot of our base is. We do a lot of that to make sure that we're on track for sure.
Yeah. And does doing that, I mean, it sounds like it's super beneficial to do that, but is there also a little bit maybe on your end where you're like, this is kind of like what we're thinking and we really believe in this? Like, have you gotten like something that you felt so strongly about and then gotten feedback from the fans or through that data, right? Where it's like, they're not into it or something like that. Is it? I guess what I'm trying to ask is giving the audience that much sort of not control, but giving them that much power to have that feedback, can it negatively impact the work that you're doing?
I think you have to know what questions you're asking for sure, and not go too much into the detail. And that's what we do, because there was times like I was interviewing with Lionhead, and they were ready to post, and I had everything autographed, the books were all autographed, the concept art was there. We were playing the beta version, and then a week later Microsoft pulled Lionhead, and that's because they took 15 years to make the next Fable, because they were constantly reviewing what people were saying, and they were changing it. So I'm very much aware that we're not going to ask the audience, do you prefer green or red? We can't go to that level, but it's very important to understand if they're enjoying the user experience, if things could be better, where we can improve upon, not chasing our tail, but just making sure that we are on track with, the principles of the game and the design pillars. But it's more of a high level. We wouldn't go into the nuts and bolts of every single art choice or decision, but it's good to know if we're on track. Right.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And also, being about just like kind of at a high level are we going in the right direction?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
If there's someone out there listening who's either about to graduate from school or is trying to break into the industry, what sort of an outline would you give them to sort of like be like, these are the things you need to do to sort of build up a routine, like a training sort of regimen, like how you were able to, learn Max, learn Unity, learn all these things, sort of like, you're jumping into it, you're doing it yourself, you're learning, you're mastering stuff. Yeah. What advice would you give someone on like building that routine? Because I feel like if you don't start with a good foundation there, you're never going to get where you want to go, sort of deal.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's probably been said a million times, but the one piece of advice I would give is get a passion project. You have to, and then act like that's what you're working on, that you're actually in the industry, this is what you're working on. Look at other people and look at the sort of level you need to be at, because I remember speaking to my parents and showing them really cool artist work. I can't even remember who it was now, but I was like, look at this work, it's amazing. And my parents turned around and they're like, yeah, but you need to be able to do that. And I was like, you're joking, I can't do that. They're like, no, you have to be at that level, that's the level. And I'm like, right, okay. And so you have to do it about something you're passionate. And I think a passion project is the best way to do it, because it was really nice that that's the first things that we spoke about was Omni, and I guess that you can probably see that that's where I've put a lot of myself into my work, and that's what I've really enjoyed doing. Because that's how I've got better, practicing 2D and 3D constantly and acting like this is a real book, this is a real game, this is a real website. I think that's the most important piece of advice that I can give, because if you don't have that, then you're just going to be teaching yourself things and they're not going to mean so much, I would say.
I think that's brilliant advice, because I can think back to tons of times when I was learning how to model, but I didn't really have a passion project for that.
Yeah.
And so I fell, not that I was really ever in love with it, but I never really pursued it more than I needed to for what I was doing. I was more on like the production side and story side of things and design. So I was more interested in that stuff. I wasn't, so I didn't really have that. So that's I think that's a great piece of advice. Have your passion project where everything that you're working on is also acting as you're learning by doing.
Yeah, because I think unless you have that, you're a bit blind and kind of in the dark. I mean, if you're just modelling for the sake of modelling, you're like, oh, okay, I'm modelling a brick for a house. This is incredibly boring. But now I'm modelling a sword that could be used in a Lord of the Rings game. I'm going to have all this detail etched into it, and it's going to glow, and we're going to animate it, and it's going to spin around, and, we're going to be able to zoom in on it. And, something that would be like... that would be something that I would be really interested in doing. And I'd be like, I'm going to make that sword the best sword that I can possibly do. Like it has to be something that you're passionate about, something you really, really like. Even something that you've seen out there that you want to replicate, that could be the passion project. It doesn't have to be something completely brand new. It could be that you just want to get it exactly like the sword that you saw in the Amazon, series that I'm going to watch tonight.
Nice. Well, I think that's, like I said, wonderful advice. And Katie, thank you so much for spending some time with us. This was really enlightening, and it's a great story. And congratulations on all your success and perseverance. I think it's very inspiring. Is there any plugs you want to give at the end of the show, maybe for people to find Omni or any of your work that you're doing now at Fusebox? Now is a great time to plug anything you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, I really am going to start ramping up Omni again. The website's omnithegame.co.uk. I'm looking to really get back into it, and I really want to get the book published as well. So there'll be lots of illustrations coming up that are going to be in the book. I'm going to release little snippets, some little short stories from the book as well. So hopefully that will drum up some interest. I'm even looking to maybe rent one of those billboards and put a big piece of artwork up there when it's published, of course. But yeah, that's definitely, I'm still looking at my passion project, even though it started in 2016. We're still going. But yeah, I'm ready to release that to the world for sure.
That's great. I can't wait to see it. And this was a lot of fun, Katie. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right, that's going to wrap up our show. We want to thank Katie for being our guest this week. To find out more about Mudstack, head over to mudstack.com, where you can find links to our Twitter, LinkedIn, and join our community on Discord. And of course, we want to thank you for listening. We'll see you next time on Clear as Mud.